Hi, welcome to the G7 briefing looking at Italy 2024. It's January, it's kicking off. The Italian presidency has started. So it's a chance for us to take a look at the agenda, understand some of the politics around the agenda with a view to looking at what we think the G7 priorities will be for the Italian government, go into some details, especially around climate, and then talk about civil society engagement with the C7 as well as the other engagement groups, but primarily the C7s are focused here. My name is Cal Cura. I run What World Strategies, and I been holding some briefings on these things for some time, so it's exciting to be able to look ahead at Italy in 2024. I have also with me Federico from ECHO, based in Italy, and Francesco with the C7 Steering Committee, who will be guiding us through and sharing some information as we go along. So the agenda, I'm going to share my screen. Again, bear with me for 2 seconds. It's always fun to do this because it never quite works as perfectly as you want. There we go. Share my screen. Tell me if you see, bear with me. Tell me if you see the whole.
I'm just listening in. Yeah.
If you're on, can you record yourself?
Yeah.
What's the resolution?
I
Hi,
have literally 20.
Federico, can you
I
take a
like
look and
love
see
New
who's
Year's
talking?
resolutions. I like to write them down in
See them
themes.
anymore.
No, but I like to just like have a reset.
There we
Just
go.
think,
Just
here's
mute
what
your
I'm
mics,
doing.
please.
There we go. Let's see. Apologies for this, everyone. I will mute everyone here. There we go. So I can't see the mute button when I'm in share screen. Back to this. Okay, here. Share. And then we're going to go play from start. There we go. So this is the Italian G7 look ahead. Really what the agenda here, as I said, is agenda and politics. What's the ambition? What's the red flags coming from Italy? Ways of working, how does the Sherpa office set up, who's who, as much as we can do. Talk about civil society engagement with a deep dive into climate, and then questions and answers. And as I said, anyone who wants to share their organization's priorities and positions or campaign plans, that would be excellent. What we will do, because we have Francesco's here until the hour. So we're going to ask any of the Q&A can focus on the civil society engagement, those questions first, and then we'll go back to climate, a little bit of deep dive, and then the broader Q&A. So let's just kick off. And I'm going to sort of lay it out. And I realize that, I'm going to share some information, but we have Federico and Francesco who have on the ground there in Italy will have much more information, but I'm just going to go through kind of what we've been hearing over the past bit. This information has come through primarily speeches from the Sherpa, Luca Ferrari, and then Prime Minister Meloni herself. She made a recent speech earlier this year on the agenda and introduced some new ideas, which is interesting. But basically what we have heard is going to be an Africa agenda, partnership, economic, really looking at stopping the need for people to emigrate. And we'll come back to migration as a key point for this G7 agenda. Prime Minister Meloni introduced AI, a new AI event, she's calling it, and it's not ministerial, but an event happening before the summit looking at AI and labor. We know climate and energy is going to be sort of prominent because that's a big debate within the G7 following up from COP28. Food security, an important issue for Italy. It hosts the Rome agencies, the FAO and the World Food Program. And it quite, had one of its landmark events in 2009 was L'Aquila during the last food price crisis in 2009, and that led to one of their signature initiatives. We understand there might be a new initiative coming out this year. Migration, and I hesitate to say, because I'm not Italian, but I understand that's a very important issue for the Italian government, and looking to get the EU behind the migration issue as part of Meloni's strategy. Gender, she has said, will be part of the discussion, and then some ongoing stuff which we don't normally deal with on a big basis, but nuclear proliferation, the ongoing war in Ukraine, Gaza crisis, and then economics and finance, the bread and butter of the G7. So that's kind of what we're hearing. Going to go down to priorities, and this is my sort of interpretation. When I hear from Federico and Francesco, it'd be great to get their perspective. But again, Africa, there's renewed engagement. More than one of the lines in Meloni's speech was to be more of a partner than a predator, which is interesting. Invite a number of African heads of states as well as the AU, and then It's earlier in 2023, Maloney Sherpa called the G7 the Mediterranean Summit. AI, as I said, recently introduced in issue. Migration, how to address that migration is a key theme, and then climate finance, energy transition, especially in the global south. Ministerials. Actually, no, I'll stop there, and I'm going to ask for Federico and I can see my emails. I'm good. Federico and Francesco to join in and share any perspective on the agenda. What did we hear on the agenda? And if people have any points, please throw them into the chat as well.
Yeah, sorry, Federico, I take the word also because I'm gonna leave, unfortunately, 2:30. So I actually think you did a great job, Kel, and the agenda is pretty much what we heard up until now. Of course, it is not official yet, and there is a discussion as far as we know on the issue notes. You know, for each of the different thematic, the Sherpa office of the presidency draft issue notes, and then they share these issue notes with the other Sherpa offices of the other G7 countries to come up with the priority within the priorities. I think that this is more or less what you listed are more or less the priorities that Italy wants to focus on. Up to now, I mean, we're still waiting for a couple of health ministerial to find out if they will happen and where they will happen and when they will happen. But the G7 website is going to be is under construction. The official Italian government G7 presidency website, and it will come up in few days. I stop here. I don't know if Federico wants to say something, and then I would really love to go into the G7 and how we want to structure and how you all can join before I leave at 2:30.
Definitely.
No, thanks, Francesco. Please go on. I will fill in after you're done.
No, actually, Federico, would you just do you want to come in on some of the politics ambition, and then
Okay.
we're going to give lots of time to
Okay.
you, Francesco.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I just want to say that there are, in fact, a couple of dates for the ministerial meetings that have been approved.
I have a whole list.
So there are a few of them, at least for energy, climate, finance, the Leaders Summit, and the Foreign Affairs Ministerial have been the calendar has been published a couple of days ago. We have, but there's still a lot of ministerials that have to be scheduled. About the agenda items, I completely agree with Kel. The main issue, I will dive deep into the climate and energy agenda after Francesco's intervention.
Great. Well, let's just continue on. And Francesco, we're going to make sure you have lots of time, but I just want to go through sort of the meetings I have actually listed on my presentation, all the ministerial. So let's just go back to that now. Share screen, back to this. Apologies, everyone, for this chopping and changing, but I do want to get the experts' input. Change this. Start. Okay, we're going to start. Apologies. So here's the ministerials, and there are a lot of them. We have industry, transport, foreign affairs, climate, justice, finance, education, and goes on. I haven't included the AI event to this. I don't know, it says it's a ministerial, what format that will take. I bolded the ones that are sort of more relevant to the work that this group normally does, which is foreign affairs, climate, energies, environment, finance, education, international development, gender equality, women's empowerment, and health. I have heard today that the international development ministerial is now penciled in for October. No concrete dates, but they say it's going to happen in October. So there's a lot happening in terms of ministerials. I know the G7, other G7 governments will not be pleased with this because it's a huge amount of work for them. And I know, speaking with some G7 countries, they're always looking to narrow down the number of ministerials, but it looks like Italy has gone in a different direction on that. Just going down to the next slide. It's going to let me do that. I just want to take a quick look at, bear with me. There we go. Just a quick, just remind people kind of how the G7 Sherpa works. You have different tracks. You have a finance track, you have a Sherpa track, foreign affairs and political directors. And then you have the working groups that will deal with each ministerial. So you have a health working group, finance working group, a development working group, and they feed into the specific ministerials, and each ministerial feeds into the G7 summit. Although some ministerials will take place after the G7 summit, but it'll all sort of fit into the overall G7 agenda for Italy that year. And then in terms of who we know who's who in the Sherpa's office, the Sherpa is Luca Ferrari. The two sous Sherpas, Fastio, and I'm going to, sorry for my pronunciation, Fastio Panciaco, who is the G7 sous Sherpa head of the office. Don't know why I said support there. Apologies for that. And he was the person who ran the G20 with Italy's recent hosting a G20, so he has experience, and so he's sort of in charge of running the office. And then Fabrizio Saggio has been recently in December appointed as a G7 sous Sherpa, or diplomatic ambassador. And so those are sort of the key people there. And then we have 14 experts working on the issues, going back to the ministerials. We know a couple of them, Francesco Rempo as food and nutrition expert and Claudia Calli as a health expert. Unfortunately, I don't know the rest, and it'd be great to start pulling those together. And then looking at key moments, we have the issue papers, which Francesco referred to. They're going to be putting these out on each of the topics, and they'll go out to the G7 governments. They're not made public, although they'll really be interesting to see because they will detail sort of Italy's ambitions. Prime Minister Meloni will make a speech at Davos where she'll really formally lay out the agenda, and that will happen. Davos, I think, is next week. And then the first Sherpa meeting, which I now know is going to happen the 24th of January. And then we don't know from then. Unfortunately, G7 is not as transparent as the G20, and it's the G20 publishes date and locations of the Sherpa meeting. I will hold up. Francesco, I have a couple of slides on the engagement groups. Would you like me to just go them quickly before you take over?
Yeah, but can you just go back to the previous another one? No, the next one. Sorry, the next one.
The minister?
No. Sorry,
Which
go
one?
ahead. Go ahead. No. Yes. Okay. Another one.
Okay.
Yes, this one. So Fabrizio Saggio
Yeah.
is not the sous Sherpa.
Okay, I got that wrong.
And he is the diplomatic advisor to the Prime Minister, while the Sherpa Luca Ferrari is another diplomatic advisor, but he will just focus on G7 and G20. And of course, in 2024, Luca Ferrari will focus mainly on the G7 since Italy has the presidency. But Fabrizio Saggio is another diplomatic advisor that will deal on all the external and international affairs for the Prime Minister, not the sous Sherpa. I don't think that there is a sous Sherpa this year. The head of the office is Fausto Panebianco. And the health expert is not a female, is a male, is Claudio Calli. Calli. Okay. Just wanted to correct this. If you want
perfect.
to go
Thanks.
to the engagement, and then I'll
Thanks.
go.
I appreciate that, and apologies everyone for making that wrong, but some of the stuff I'm learning on the fly over the last day or two. So
you did a great job.
going back to so just to go to the official engagement groups, because this is kind of new to the G7 over the last 3 or 4 years. It's kind of taken on the G20 approach. So we now have official engagement groups, and I've listed them here. There's a few more than this. There's the B7, Civil 7, Labor 7, Science, Think, Women's, Youth, and Urban, which is unofficial / official because we don't know exactly where that sits. We're going to talk about the C7 today. I say Leeds Venro Summit. I apologize. I forgot to update this because this is left over from a previous briefing. But the lead today is the GCAP steering committee. Well, Francesco can go into more detail. They've been going on for a long time, and here's just kind of a little review. This will be in the presentation. No point reading it over now, but just I've been collecting over the years what they've been doing. It started off in 2005. Actually wasn't a C7. It was a meeting with the Prime Minister. Russia was actually the first person who kicked off the C7, surprisingly, and did a very comprehensive job. And then they've been going on ever since, except the EU in 2014, because they took over last minute when Germany was removed from the G7, and then the US, who did not have a G7. And then the last one was in Japan, a large meeting over 2 days, which had the Prime Minister, and Janik said there was 200 people in the room and 300 people virtually. So they're quite good. They're getting a lot of traction. So I'll hand over to Francesco, who is on the C7 steering committee. I'll stop share.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. I actually don't have slides, but I can tell you that we are structuring our G7 structure, and we're shaping it up. We have a chair who is Riccardo Moro of the Civil 7. We have a Sherpa who is Valeria Emmi. Then we have a communication manager and someone that deals with the secretariat and all the administration. And of course, we are dividing our Civil 7 structure in different working groups. We will try to work together with the other engagement groups that Kel mentioned. And of course, we will try to work with the Sherpa office in the best way. I will go through the different working groups now to let you know. Most of them are the same one as the Japanese Civil 7 process, but some are different because of the different priorities the presidency want to focus on. So we try to align to be able to work together with the different Sherpa office experts that Kel was mentioning before. They are starting, as I was saying, they're starting to create their working group within the Sherpa offices to work in the different on the different issues, and we are trying to interact with them to get some info on the issue notes. Of course, we will try to share everything with all of you and with all the Civil 7 entities that will participate. I actually sent before the website of the Civil 7 for this year. I don't know if you can see it in the chat. Anyway, is civil7.org, very easy. And I would ask you to click on it and to surf a little bit on the website and to subscribe to the Civil 7 and to the newsletter, and to participate, especially in the kickoff meeting. So there will be a kickoff meeting next week on Thursday, the 18th of January. I will put here now on the chat the link to subscribe to and to register to the kickoff meeting for next week, again January 18th in the afternoon Italian time. And most of all, I would like to really invite you to participate in the kickoff meeting, but then also to subscribe to the different working groups. And among the different working groups, I would go now and tell you which are this year the working groups of the Civil 7, and I really hope that you will be able to join the working groups and work together with us So one working group will be on global health, of course, and this is in continuity with the Japanese Civil 7. Another one changed a little bit the title, and it's climate, energy transformation, and environmental justice. Another one is economic justice and transformation. I'm talking about 7 working groups. So these were the first 3. Then principle humanitarian assistance, peace, common security, and nuclear disarmament, human mobility and migration, and food justice and food systems transformation. Of course, we will have a major focus on human rights and on gender equality that will be cross-cutting in all these 7 working groups that I mentioned. And you can find the list of the working groups and register to participate in the different working groups on the website that I shared. I'll share the page of the working groups right now in the chat. But we have another 5 minutes for me to participate, unfortunately. So I would like to open it to question and answer, Kel. I don't know what do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. There's some great questions in the chat already. They're a bit more broader than the C7, but let's just focus on the C7 while we have Francesco for the next 5 minutes. Are there any particular questions specifically related to the C7 and the processes and the working groups? Any questions for that? Valentina, go ahead. Ask your question live.
Hi everyone, Valentina from Global Citizen. I just put it in the chat, but I was curious, Francesco, if finance issues are addressed in the economic transformation one. I think that's how you called it. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's the
So
one. Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So the name of the working group is Economic Justice and Transformation.
Great. And Alice, before Alice, you speak, Marwan's asked, is the date for the C7 meeting fixed, Francesco?
No, not yet. We are thinking about May. We would like to know, as many of us, the dates for the Sherpa meetings and try to organize it in the last in-person meeting that usually happens in Rome. So we're still waiting to finalize that the Civil 7 summit. Yeah.
Okay, great. Alice?
Yeah, a couple of questions. Thanks. This is really helpful. I haven't really engaged in the C7 before, so it'd be helpful just to get an outline of where the main inputs will be and what is the direct engagement with either in country or the Italian government. It would just be helpful just to understand that. Like, will there be input from the working groups into those issue papers, or will those get presented at any point? Just a little bit of an overview of what might happen in the groups. Also, this is a broader question, but touches on this. Is in terms of other countries invited to the G7, like priority countries within Africa, I'm sure we can all guess at them. But in terms of participation in working groups from certain countries, are there any geographies that are particularly coming up or countries specifically that you expect to have a bigger role that we might want to make sure, I'm sure you are, but there are representatives from those countries in the working groups?
Thanks, yes. Francesco?
Yes. So other countries, I mean, either from the 7 countries, there is the European Union that participate officially. Then sometimes the different working groups, for example, Global Health Working Group, usually the expert of the Sherpa offices sometimes meet with the non-state actors like UN agencies or other entities to consult. They try to engage with the other engagement group, but there is no direct participation of our working groups with the Sherpa offices. in the issue note and in the communicate that they start drafting after the agreement on the different issue notes. So I don't know if I answered everything on the policy.
Any follow-up questions, Alice?
I mean, it's probably a more broader strategic question. I guess I'm just trying to understand the biggest value add of the C7. Is it their own declaration that comes out, or is it organising around specific themes to influence what the government is doing? And I don't know, you know, obviously the AU's become a member of the G20. Is there any recognition of that within the G7 that they might be also engaging directly with the AU? Like that, yeah. Just because I haven't really engaged that much, it would just be great to know where you feel the biggest value add of the C7 could be and should be.
And
So-
one follow-up question to that, Francesco, because I know you're tight, is Eunice is asking, is a C7 interacting with the C20?
But to register on the working groups. Okay. So there is interaction. We are in touch with the Civil 20, and we will try to work as much as we can, especially on some of the issues that are not covered by the G7 usually, for example, finance and some other issues which are more covered by climate and health, for example, would probably be covered by the G20 more than the G7 as far as we know. So we try to really work in coordination with the Civil 20. What is the added value? I mean, the Civil 7 is an official now engagement group. So we the Sherpa of the Civil 7 interacts very much with the Sherpa office. And the Sherpa office try to consult with the Sherpa of the Civil 7. All the work that we do at the narrative level on the different working groups will then gather into the work of the steering committee of the Civil 7, and it will end up into a final communique of the Civil 7 in May. This will be presented to the different Sherpas. In the past, Civil 7 happened at the presence of the different Sherpas of the 7 countries seated at a table and discussing it just usually before the summit. If all this process influence really the summit and the final communique of the leaders, but of course it's a very important work, very important process, and it stays there to try to influence the summit, and then also to replicate to the final communique, and to discuss and reflect on the final communique of the G7, and everything that comes out from the Civil 7 goes to the Sherpa officially, because it's an official engagement group. So I think it's very important to participate, and I would really like to reiterate the invitation to participate in the kickoff meeting, and we can discuss. We have several hours in the afternoon of the 18th next week, in a week from now, to discuss and to present the work of the different working groups. And this group that Kel coordinates since many years have been always very, very involved and engaged in the Civil 7. So I really hope that you all will register and get involved.
Great. Thanks, Francesco. Appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy, and I think you're straight off to a C7 steering committee meeting now. So brilliant for your input. I think now we'll just go to before we go to you, Federico, and some of the climate stuff, let's just go over some of the broader questions.
Bye. Thank you so much.
See you. Take care.
For leaving you guys.
And I think that, I mean, Federico, but also others, people who are tracking the G7, if you have an input, that'd be great to hear your responses. We have a question is, do you think the agenda of the G7 presidency will change after the elections on the EU elections on June 7th? Because it's going to happen a week following that. We have another question on AMR, antimicrobial resistance. I could never say that properly. In the agenda, and whether that get much focus. And then the joined up between the G7 agendas. G7 and G20's agenda. Apologies. Anything you want? Any thoughts on those, Federico's, or any other colleagues?
Well, about the agenda and the impact of the European elections, I think since as you showed when you show the calendar, the G7 ministerial meetings, many of the most important, the most important meetings will take place before, or the ministerials will take place before the elections, or during the electoral campaign of the elections. So I don't think we'll see a big shift in the outcome. Also, as you said, the Leaders Summit will take place in mid-June. So it's right after the elections. I don't think it will have a huge impact. So also, well, that's my opinion.
That's fair enough. And on the AMR, I've been following the G7 for a while. AMR is a continual discussion within the G7, has come up quite a bit. They've tried to make some inroads on voluntary ways of addressing AMR and the use of antibiotics. I think we'll see it again. It'll probably come up a lot through perhaps some of the food and agriculture discussions that will happen. I don't know if it's going to take a particularly prominent role. It seems to always be there. It never seems to, perfectly honest, get a lot of action, but it is certainly discussed, and within the food and agriculture perspective that Italy will take on board, it probably will have a bit more prominence. Marina, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Kelly. I'm Francesca.
Hey, Francesca.
Hi. Maybe I switch off my camera. Yes, from the discussion that I have, it will be also in the health agenda.
Okay.
Of course, with the potential link with the high-level meeting on IMR in September, but still, I think that is our role, our responsibility to make the case. When the Italian government is speaking about IMR is, of course, globally, but also in the G7 countries, because as you probably know, Italy is one of the countries where there is the higher problem of IMR due to different reasons. So IMR will be in the agenda, and but we are really at the beginning. So there is an interest, but we don't know. For the moment, they don't have like specific action on this.
Great. Thanks for that. Thanks for clarification. Anya and Maureen asked two sort of really large questions. One is sort of the political priorities for Italy. What would the Italian government want to achieve in its presidency? And then Maureen asked about the political context, especially around some sensitive issues or some stuff like the gender, economic issues, Gaza, climate. She asked, we're concerned there may be a risk of opening up areas or placing a focus on specific themes and ending it with more regressive language and lower ambition commitments. Just want to get some thoughts. What are the political sensitivities within the Italian government on some of these issues? And it's a bit of a broad question. I don't know if we're going to be able to answer it, but does anybody have any thoughts to that? Anybody want to jump in on that?
May I just jump in and clarify what I meant? Because I realize it's a really broad question, but it's probably, hi everyone, it's probably a bit broader than the C7 and the different constituencies. But I guess no matter which issue we're working on, we're always working with the government, right? And to decide strategically whether we should really focus on, say, gender equality and the care economy, it would be good to get some intelligence on what the context is in Italy and whether we run a risk if we're focusing on that too heavily, whether we're running a risk of ending up with more regressive language and lower commitments, and whether we should just keep quiet and keep what we have so far and then bank on the next presidency. I guess the same is the case with climate or anything humanitarian or anything else related to economic transformation. Would just be good for us and other countries to understand which political context we're up against as we're strategizing. Thank you.
No problem. I think that's a question we're going to have to do at all the issues. We're looking at the balance, how Italy as a government will want to see language and what they'll oppose and what they'll propose. And I think maybe that will be best be done in the individual working groups around the C7, which will have the political analysis maybe coming in from that. That could help people judge how far to push, and then also share it within the different global task force working groups. I saw someone briefly had a hand up there. I think it's a broad question, just something we have to keep an eye on. And I think every organization, the priorities will have to find that information with Italian colleagues. Anya, you have raised your hand.
Yeah, sorry, I did the hand up and down because I think it's something that is probably we could maybe find on the website. My question was kind of, so countries often, the G7 leads often want like to either cement their place on the global stage or be seen as a technical lead or be the leading voice on a certain issue. And I guess I was just wondering, how is Italy talking about its G7 leadership? Is it, you know, that it's cementing its place in Europe? Is it that it's going to be the leading voice with African partnership? Just kind of that context, because that would help us shape our advocacy messages. So we're feeding into that kind of prioritization.
Okay. Does any Italian colleagues, Federico, others have?
If I might give a short answer on Anya's question. In fact, yes. I mean, the declared goal of Italy in international affairs is to become a bridge between the North and the South. So the G7 will be the main opportunity for the government to do so. This is why there might be opportunities also to cooperate on a G7, G20, G21 level, because Italy wants to become a leading actor, not just on the Mediterranean area, so not just with Northern Africa and the Near East and the Middle East, but also with a broader global South. Meloni has been declaring since she took power in September 2022 that Italy's goal is to become a bridge between the global North and the global South.
Makes sense. That makes sense. Great. Well, Federica, while you've got the floor, let's move now, if that's all right. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the climate work. And I think they'll answer a question, for example, I think Lydia asked if IDA 21 will be focused on G7. I think that'll clump in our climate finance stuff. So if you can kick off that, and then when Federico finishes, we'll have a Q&A and people can share their own ambitions and plans as well in the final minutes of the call. So handing over to you, Federico.
Yeah, of course. So I have a quick presentation. It's not going to take long. I'm going to share the screen now. So, I mean, the title is a bit ambitious, but in fact, I'm going to talk mostly about the energy and climate environment agenda. So just a very quick picture of the political context. The Meloni's government is very strong. It has one of the largest majorities that Italy has seen so far in the recent history, and her party is by far the largest in Italy with 26% at the elections 2 years ago and a bit more nowadays. In fact, Meloni is the foremost right-wing politician. She has replaced Salvini, and since the death of Silvio Berlusconi, his party has not managed to stay as relevant as it was before. So, just a quick point of the priorities of the agenda, because Italy. In terms of energy, we'll talk a lot about energy security, which means basically diversifying fossil fuels import routes for the G7 countries, especially in relation, of course, with the conflict in Ukraine and the energy dependency that most of Western Europe has towards Russia in terms of Russian hydrocarbons. Now we have, I mean, it's been a while, a lot of instability in the Middle East too, with the Suez Canal and the Red Sea being among, I mean, the Suez Canal route being a target of Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. So there's going to be there is a disruption in global trade. And let's not forget the Red Sea is one of the main LNG routes for Europe. So this is going to be, I mean, this security is going to play a major role in the energy agenda. Another important item in the agenda will be the impact of the transition on real economy in terms, especially of job creation and destruction and long-term growth. And in terms of transition, and again, with strong ties with trade issues and supply security, there's going to be a focus on the global value chains, especially with about critical raw materials that are necessary for the energy transition. In that regard, there's going to be a strong focus on Africa, because as I just said, Italy's main priority in terms of foreign affairs is Africa, which is I mean, many African countries are among the largest producers of critical raw materials for the energy transition. So, for example, rare earth, for example, metals or other minerals that are critical for the industrial energy transition. In terms of climate finance, the priorities are a review of vertical climate funds, so the thematic funds that have been set up at the international level. Another main topic will be the disaster risk reduction, including insurance, which is a main issue. And for the private sector, there's going to be one of the main issues will be the review of the capital adequacy framework. So let's say the investment strategies of the companies, but it's not really clear how that will be brought forward. Since we're talking about the political agenda, I just have here a picture of the 5 key ministers. So Giorgetti for economy and finance, Tajani for foreign affairs, Pichetto Fratin for environment and energy, so energy climate, Adolfo Urso for industry and trade, which is going to be central. Also, he will deal with, since we talk about artificial intelligence, his minister is the one in charge of artificial intelligence, so might be interesting to follow. And for decarbonization and infrastructure, of course, Matteo Salvini, who is also deputy prime minister, will play a key role. In terms of the cabinet, I put to complement your representation. I mean, we already know Luca Ferrari and Fausto Panebianco, but in about energy and climate and environment, the advisors are going to be Agostino Inguscio with a focus on energy and Duccio Maria Tenti with a focus on environment. So this is might something we want to keep in mind. For the calendar, I mean, the meetings, you already shown the full calendar, but there's one thing that it does not belong strictly to the G7 agenda, but it's going to be part of the Italian broader foreign policy and also will influence the Italian presidency. Is the Italy-Africa summit that's going to take place at the end of January in Rome, because it's where the Italian strategy towards Africa will be presented, and it will clearly shape the presidency. So that's more or less what I had in mind for the presentation, and I mean, I'm open to questions if everybody. I think you will have some questions, so I'll be happy to answer if I can.
That's great. That's great. There's one question from Marwan. Marin, I don't know if Marwan wants to ask it directly, but just asking, would love the Citizen Climate Lobby France would love to contribute to the climate change working group. Is it possible to submit a white paper to the climate group, and if so, where? And I presume by the climate group, Marin, you are referring to the G7 experts working group on climate, not the C7 climate working group. But could someone come back on that, Federico? Sorry, Federico. Just
Yeah, sorry.
how do we engage with the expert working groups, the G7? That applies to climate, but also applies across all the working groups. How do you engage with those?
Oh, well, in Italy, direct contact is very important. So don't be afraid to write directly to the Sherpa team. That's going to be either you pass through the different G7 instances, for example, the C7 or the U7 or other 7 groups. But if you want to talk with the political with the G7 Sherpas team, you just have to find a way to talk to them directly.
Okay, that's useful. Marwan, you have a question?
Yeah, not very issue-based, not very professional as usual.
Yeah.
But in the whole circus you have been presenting, and everybody has been presenting, the only female is the Prime Minister. Is there one female rep in the whole circus of G7 whatevers this year? Or is it all gonna be dick-wearing folks we have to contend with? I mean, just for the gender issue, I'm asking, but this is striking.
I absolutely. Most of the politically appointed positions are occupied by males, whereas many civil. I mean, you're perfectly right. And many civil servants are women, though. But the politically, I mean, it's a conservative right-wing government, so it's something we should have expected, and it's not completely surprising to me, unfortunately.
No, totally agree. But this is something we might want to hammer back, or maybe just provide a nice counter picture. Wherever we show up all females as a goodwill measure of civil society to bring balance to the room, some stuff like that, because this is really, my goodness. Thank you very much, Francesco, Federico. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Marwan. Thanks for your intervention. Any other questions? Excuse me, on a slightly, not just climate, but looking a bit broader, Yoko from Save the Children Japan has asked whether or not education will be one of the main agenda items, given this is the AU education year. I'll respond to that. We do not have an education ministerial, as far as I'm aware, and I'm not entirely sure this will be a priority.
Sorry, yes, sorry, Kel, there is one.
Is there?
It's
I lied.
Yes, it's education. It's at the end of June in Trieste. Let me check.
Okay.
It's from the 27th to the 29th in Trieste. It's the education agenda. It's the education ministerial.
Do you think it's a priority of the Meloni government, or do you think it'll be wrapped into the wider African agenda?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not an expert on the sector, sorry.
Okay, fair enough.
Maybe if I can jump in, I don't know if sorry, it's Francesca. Is not I'm not an expert either of education, but what I can say is something that is very present on all the speeches of the Vice Minister in charge of cooperation. It seems that is quite interesting in education. And in all the speeches that Meloni do about her plan in Africa, she really emphasized the role of education and the role also of professional training that, you know, to improve in Africa.
Useful. Thanks for that. Jorn, you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Kel, and thanks. Hi, Kel, and everybody. Thanks for organizing this. Very helpful. I was wondering whether you could kind of check and coordinate with Italian colleagues and give us an updated PPT of the ministerials and the calendar, because I think there have been coming in information and during this call would be very helpful.
I've been updating it as we talk.
Okay. How could I have not thought about that? Okay, thank you. And the other one, it's a little bit more concrete on the kind of connection between G20 and G7 agendas. And you mentioned in the beginning, Kel, that there might be a new initiative coming out of the G7 on food and or against hunger, whatever. And since also Lula has made it one of its priorities to fight hunger in the world, I was wondering, what are the concrete information about the Italian initiative, and how is maybe the interaction between G20 and G7 in concrete terms on this issue? Thank you.
Thanks, Jorn. Federico, do you have a response to that? Can also give some thoughts.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
I think there's a lot of overlap between the G20. Brazil has shown an interest in food and nutrition, I think, as well as Italian government. So will there be some sort of collaboration and cooperation?
Yes, we think, in fact, that food and agriculture will be one of the, since I anticipated a bit during my at the beginning of my speech that in fact Italy wants to cooperate with Brazilian presidency. Food and agriculture will be one of the main topics that can be discussed together. Especially because both countries have, I mean, maybe not in terms of food. I mean, I'm not sure about food because that's not my field of expertise. But for example, among them, the many things in common between the Brazilian presidency and the Italian presidency is the focus on biofuels. Both of them have, both Italy and Brazil are want biofuels to play a major role in the energy transition. So that, as you know, that has impact on food security. So probably there's going to be some cooperation on that aspect.
Right. And I think the G20, G7, a lot of the people on this call are experts as well, but the G7, G20 nexus has talked about shared agendas a lot more, and especially in the last couple of years, it's just not really quite apparent how that concretely hits the ground. It depends on the dynamics between the two leaders at both the G20 and G7 countries. So it's not institutionalized. There's not joint meetings on the agenda necessarily. It's ad hoc, and it's depend on what the two governments want to do. Alice, do you want to come in?
Oh yeah, it's actually kind of questions, but I run the Hungry for Action campaign, which lots of people are members of, but we are really looking, I guess, a bit more at the G20 because there's more tangible information around the Alliance on Hunger and Poverty, which is planned to be launched in November, and countries are asked to sign up. So I think it is good to interrogate this. Just a kind of question on the politics. There's quite a lot. There's obviously a lot listed. Do you feel like there's one or two, I think you said migration at the top, that are really like the things that will come out concretely? And do you think there is actually an appetite from the Italian government for big ideas? I think it felt a bit more, and more people were involved in this, but last year with the Macron summit, that they were looking for kind of tangible specifics around financing to announce. Do you feel like there's an opportunity to put forward a big idea on any of these areas? Do you think they're really open to that, or not so much? Would be good to just get your take on that.
Pretty good. You want to do a stab at that?
Yeah, I'm not sure the Italian presidency will achieve something revolutionary or world-changing, considering the evolution of the issues that have been discussed during the Japanese presidency and before. But that's clearly, I mean, especially in terms of migration and security, since they are a top policy agenda at a national level, they will anything. I mean, I think the government will try to get something concrete also to be used on a national level for political reasons, to show that Meloni's government is up to the task at the international level.
Great. And as a follow-up to that, whether or not the government will be looking for something as high as the LACLA Food Security Initiative they agreed in 2009. Other than we know their initiative, I don't really know what people are thinking behind that, how much they're going to get the ambition. the Italian government, the G7 in Italy and the G7 is a key player, but it's not one of the big one that can leverage a lot of political capital out of the US, for example, or the UK, France, and Germany. It has to do those negotiations much more. Not like the US can sort of say it wants something to happen, and it usually gets the other G7 governments to rally around it. So it's a lot more of a negotiation point for Meloni's government. So it makes looking for money, for example, or a big significant initiative harder for the Italian government to turn around, unless they have support from one of the the US or UK, France, and Germany. I'm conscious we have 1 minute to go. Is there any other pressing questions for anybody that wants to get them out there? Sorry, there's a couple here. There we go. So no other questions. Well, I want to thank Federico for taking the time to come on board. I'd like to also thank the colleagues who came on and made some comments and helped share and contribute to the information for the group. That's really been very helpful. I'm looking to perhaps do this again, perhaps later in February with another update and maybe another focus on a particular issue, gender, health, or whatever other people might think would be useful. It'd be great to get some feedback. So do drop me an email with some ideas and suggestions. But in the meantime, this was just a look ahead. We have the agenda. We'll take a look at the WEF when Meloni goes and announces the official agenda at Davos. And I will put the recording up on the site. And good luck to all and good advocacy. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, Ken.
Bye.
Thanks, Ken.